Here's what I want to say. You do not always have to do things with your finances just because somebody said you need to. You do not have to be scared about doing something with your finances just because somebody said you should never do that. Yes, have some core key concepts that you need to follow and move towards. But the details that are required in making some of those goals and concepts come to life, those could be personal. I have a confession. My wife and I, we have had fights about money. Have you been there? So the reason why we fight is because we're different. The way I engage with money and use the bank account versus the way she likes to use the bank account, like I said, it's different. And one of us isn't right or wrong, it's just the way we are. So I'm super detailed and like to track things like crazy, and I reconcile stuff often. Whereas she's a lot more relaxed with things. And doing all those details adds stress and anxiety to her life. So because we do things differently, it just wasn't working. So this video is a story of what we did to fix it. Now, to be fully transparent, the way we fixed this was something that we did on accident. We stumbled upon the solution. So the story starts with the fact that I didn't like Bank of America. I was extremely frustrated with having to go into the bank sometimes, and then the way that they would engage with me or the customer service that they would give me or my wife, it was just so inconvenient. I didn't necessarily like the online banking options or their technology. Nothing was working. I was frustrated and I wanted to change banks. So as I was going through that process of trying to determine what bank to use, I stumbled across an online-based bank, and it looked like they had some really cool tools. So along with the checking account that you would get, you would also get some things that helped you track some of your spending and reconcile things, basically automate a lot of the budgeting. So if you remember, I like to track all that stuff. I'm super detailed. And I'm like, wow, this is gonna be the bank account for me. The one downside is that they did not do joint accounts. This means that the only way we could switch to this is if I had an account and then my wife had an account. And for us, we thought it was okay, and here's why. One, we are very unified in our relationship and in our finances. We have a budget that we've created together. It's a plan that we've agreed to stick to, and we are pursuing it. We also have the same financial goals, long-term, short-term, and life goals. So we have a lot of unity. But we also have a lot of transparency. My wife has the passwords to all the things in my life, and I to her. We can peek in and view different parts of our life whenever we want. We're extremely transparent. So the same would go for the bank accounts as well. Because of that unity and that transparency, we felt confident about moving forward. Now, before we had two separate checking accounts, again, we lived in the same checking account like probably most of you guys do. And one of the areas that was tough for us was there were certain expenses that I managed and certain expenses that she managed. The expenses I managed were super consistent. They were some of those bills, things like utilities and the mortgage. The stuff that she managed was things like groceries and gifts and kids' activities. The kids' activities and the groceries and gifts are a lot more inconsistent. Some months there might be a lot of that, and some months there might not be any at all. Whereas the expenses I was managing, they were very consistent. We knew that we were gonna have to pay those, and sure, they might go up and down throughout the year, but those were easier for me to reconcile. Enter two separate bank accounts. As we looked at our plan on our budget, we were easily able to identify which ones she would manage, which ones I would manage, and from there just did the math and automatically transferred money into my account and her account to ensure we had enough to pay those expenses. Now I know what you're thinking. This is scary. You're not sure if one person in the relationship will be able to manage it well. You've gotten all kinds of advice that if you want to be one in your marriage and you want to have a great marriage, you have to have the same bank account. But here's the thing. I'm kind of an arrogant jerk. I think I'm right a lot. I have a lot of confidence about trying to fix things or do things differently. But again, beyond that, I knew my wife and I were unified and we were on the same page. We have great communication, and we definitely were unified in what we wanted to do with our finances. So I believed it was going to work. And here's the thing. It worked, and worked way better than I ever thought it would. So as I was managing my account, I could be as detailed as I wanted, and I could reconcile as often as I wanted, and I could go down to the penny with basically anything and everything and project expenses in the future because I didn't have another person in that checking account using it differently than the way I wanted to use it. And that made things so much easier for me. And it prevented me from having to go to her and ask questions like, hey, I saw you spent this much money at Target. Why did you do that? Or what is it for? I need to be able to reconcile that. Totally legitimate questions for me to answer based on how I engage with money. But to her, it's like, why in the heck are you asking that? The money's there. We're going to be fine. I never had that anymore. That conflict just went away. And the converse is also true for her. She no longer had somebody asking her questions that in her mind didn't matter and they weren't relevant. She was still sticking within the budget, within the plan. Again, we're one with the finances there. Yet now she had the freedom to be able to think about what life might be like in the next month. She knew that there might be certain kids' activities, so she would kick back on spending those in this month. She knew that we might have a party and need to have more groceries one month, so she would spend a little bit less in groceries in this month. She needed simplicity and flexibility. And I needed details. So with this new system, 2 different checking accounts, we had the freedom to be able to act however we wanted in our checking account. Now, here's the really good news. Not only did this eliminate a lot of the conflicts that we were having with money in the past, but it made the money conversations that we had moving forward so much better. It allowed us to keep the main thing, focus more on our financial goals and our future, dream together, talk about that, and update each other on our progress. And it was a lot less about reconciling this, details on that. This whole thing has been a huge win for us. Yes, in our finances, but also in our relationship. But I understand this truth. Having 2 separate bank accounts, it's not for everyone. And if you want more details on exactly how we did this, you can listen to the podcast interview where me and my wife talk about what we did and how we did it. We even shared 3 things that you really need to make sure you focus on in order to succeed if you decide to separate your bank accounts. But the how of separating bank accounts isn't necessarily what I want to communicate in this video. Here's what I want to say. You do not always have to do things with your finances just because somebody said you need to. You do not have to be scared about doing something with your finances just because somebody said you should never do that. Yes, have some core key concepts that you need to follow and move towards. But the details that are required in making some of those goals and concepts come to life, those could be personal. The heart behind the marriage advice of make sure you have the same checking account is to make sure that you're unified with your spouse. I completely agree with that. Be one. Have the same goals. Move in the same direction. But you can still be one. You can still move in the same direction and have the same goals with 2 separate checking accounts. And for my wife and I, we go further, faster in our goals and in our unity because of our 2 separate bank accounts.